You may have special needs and considerations when it comes to choosing a particular eating style. In this lecture, I'll discuss some of the most common special needs that I come across. Let's begin with vegetarian or plant-based eating. Vegetarian is essentially a plant-based diet. And there are all sorts of reasons for choosing to eat this way. And there are many ways that it's practiced in real life. There's actually a whole continuum of plant-based eating. For example, some plant-based eaters don't eat meat but do eat fish, dairy products, and eggs. Some avoid meat, fish, and eggs, but will eat dairy products. Some will just avoid red meat, but eat chicken and other poultry and fish. Other plant-based eaters still eat meat, but just not that much of it. The strictest form of plant-based eating is called vegan, and vegans avoid all animal products. And this includes anything that an animal may produce, like milk and eggs and even honey. Eating more plant foods is a good thing nutritionally. Typically, plants come along with good doses of fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, molecules that help maintain your cellular health. We also know that if you are eating more plants, you likely will eat less sugar and fat. So it's a big benefit to eat more plants, whether you eat meat or not. And there may ultimately be fewer incidences of heart disease and cancer just by eating more plants. Now, there are some very important considerations to think about when eating a plant-based diet. There's more that has to be planned and included in a plant-based diet to ensure proper intake of proteins, vitamins, minerals, and more. Combining sources of protein from plant-based eating is necessary in order to get the essential amino acids required for certain health and growth processes. Remember that there are 20 amino acids, 9 of which are considered to be essential, meaning that our bodies don't synthesize them. We have to eat them in our diets. Here's the key challenge for plant-based eaters: getting the essential amino acids found in animal products, like meat, milk, eggs, and the like, into your diet. Most plant sources of food have incomplete proteins, meaning they lack one or more of the essential amino acids needed to maintain or build your muscle tissue. The thing to do is to combine plant sources of food in order to create a mixture that is a complete protein. As we've discussed, the most common example of food combined to make a complete protein is rice and beans. 1 cup of rice has about 5 grams of protein, and a half cup of black beans has about 9 grams of protein. Together, you get a complete protein and roughly 15 grams of protein. It's easy enough to combine foods. Here's the issue though. To get this amount of protein, a plant-based dieter must also consider that they're eating roughly 300 or more calories to get those 15 grams of protein, along with a lot of carbohydrates. However, you certainly can get enough protein and even grow muscle on a plant-based diet. You just need to know what you're doing. Research has also indicated that we absorb about 95% of animal proteins that we eat, but we only absorb about 85% of plant proteins. So even when you combine plant sources of protein in order to create a complete protein, you would need even more than a meat eater to get the protein your body needs for muscle growth and maintenance. Some other vegetarian options for protein intake can also include eggs or egg whites and milk and dairy products like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, and whey or casein protein powders. For vegans, those who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy products, some protein options include legumes, grains like quinoa and buckwheat, nuts and seeds, and foods like tofu, soy or soy milk, and tempeh. Now, plant-based diets may also be low in other nutrients. It is not uncommon for plant-based eating to lead to low or deficient levels of vitamin B12, because B12 is only found as a good source in animal products like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy products. You can get B12 in foods like cereals that are fortified with B12, but otherwise supplementing may be needed. Iron is also a nutrient that needs some special attention in plant-based diets. The form of iron that is most readily absorbable comes from animal products. It's called heme iron, and it makes up about 40% of the iron in meat. The less well-absorbed form of iron, found in plants like nuts, grains, vegetables, and fruit, is called non-heme iron. Plant-based dieters need almost 2 times the amount of iron from plant sources to get the same amount of iron as meat eaters. Another important finding is that vitamin C helps you to absorb the non-heme plant-based iron. But calcium and tannins found in drinks like tea and coffee reduce non-heme iron absorption. Because many plant-based eaters consume a good amount of vitamin C, found in foods like peppers, kale, and broccoli, the absorption of iron may not be an issue at all. It just makes sense to combine iron intake with vitamin C and try to have calcium supplements or tea and coffee an hour or two before you eat iron-rich foods. Vitamin D is also a special concern for plant-based eating. Dairy foods are often fortified with vitamin D, meaning that vitamin D is added to the final food or drink during processing. Some plant-based dieters avoid dairy as well as meat. Actually, the best source of vitamin D is sunlight. So, if you're a vegetarian lacking in vitamin D, and it is winter, and you don't get much sun, then you will want to supplement with vitamin D. You'll probably want to talk to your doctor or healthcare professional about this. Plant-based eaters should also pay special attention to omega-3 fats in their diets. Very good sources of omega-3 fats are cold water fish, but plant eaters can go for walnuts, seaweed, hemp, and flax, among other choices, to take in something called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. Now, ALA is then converted to something called docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, and eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA. The types of fatty acids that are considered the heavy hitters of omega-3 fatty acids. These help with body composition and also are needed to ward off disease. The trouble is that the body uses the plant-based sources for omega-3s quite inefficiently. So once again, supplementation with a DHA or EPA product from fish oil, krill oil, or an algae-based product is needed. Other needs for plant-based eating include both calcium and zinc. Again, these can be consumed in the diet, but absorption of both tends to be low compared to non-vegetarians. Well, zinc is found in a lot of plant foods like lentils, peanuts, and quinoa. Its absorption is lower than it is when you get it from animal products. This just means that plant-based eaters need to take in more zinc to fulfill the same requirements. If you are very physically active and trying to train for performance, a few other dietary considerations include traditional sports supplements like creatine and beta-alanine. Now, creatine is made naturally in your body, but you also get some from your diet. If you eat meat and fish, that is. Those who only eat plants will have lower levels of stored creatine. Because creatine is used for short, explosive movements and has shown to have some benefits for cognition, neurological disorders, and muscle mass, supplementing with creatine might be something to consider. It turns out that vegetarians have about 50% less carnosine in their muscle tissue. Due to the link between carnosine concentrations and overall health, as well as evidence for exercise performance advantages emerging in the scientific literature, it is likely a good idea to also consider supplementing with beta-alanine for the production of carnosine. On a plant-based diet, make sure that you have a combination of plant proteins to meet your goals. A good variety of non-starchy vegetables like greens, spinach, arugula, broccoli, and squash include good fats like nuts, seeds, and healthy oils, and eat starches like bread, whole grains, and potatoes. Fruit and starchy vegetables like corn and peas to complete your energy needs. The health benefits come from a plant-based diet can be achieved by simply eating more plants. Changing gears, let's talk about some of the special nutrition needs of children. I often get the question from parents about what to feed their kids, and if a kid's diet is really any different from the way adults should eat. Well, yes and no. Both children and adults need carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. But the amount needed changes as we age. So the general recommendations are quite similar, but the details can vary. The three major nutritional concerns specifically for children are sufficient calories for proper growth, development, and performance, calcium and iron intake, and hydration. Active kids actually need more calories per kilogram or more calories per pound than adults do. They weigh a lot less, so their total intake is lower. But on a relative basis, kids need more food per pound of body weight. Dietary reference intakes exist for children, but remember that they are simply baseline recommendations meant to help children live illness and disease-free. They were not established for active kids looking to perform optimally, which is what I'd like to focus on. Relative to body weight, children need more protein and a higher percent of essential amino acids than adults because of their extreme growth rate. The recommendations for boys and girls are identical, with at least 13 grams of protein per day for kids ages 1 to 3, 19 grams for ages 4 to 8, and 34 grams for kids aged 9 to 13. After 13, the recommendations differ between boys and girls. And girls need at least 46 grams of protein, and boys need at least 52 grams of protein. This difference is mostly because boys tend to have a larger body size and larger food intake. One thing to consider, though, is that a range between 10 and 30% of protein in the diets is considered acceptable. So if your 9-year-old girl eats 1,800 calories per day, she may eat anywhere from 45 to 135 grams of protein. Some resources recommend that children who are athletes, or at least very active, eat about 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, or 0.7 grams per pound every day. To make it easy, I would simply use whole numbers and aim for slightly less than 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if your active child weighs 75 pounds, then aim for just less than 75 grams of protein. Carbohydrates also come with recommendations. Kids need about 130 grams per day, This would provide 520 calories from carbohydrates. And this may work well for your child, but you have to consider the same factors that you did for total calorie intake, especially their body size, growth rate, and activity level. These considerations primarily boil down to two basic recommendations. First, make sure that children eat enough food. And second, make sure they get enough protein to support rapid growth and development. Of particular concern with children is that, for the most part, they are entirely dependent upon adults to purchase, prepare, and pack their food. So many times, I'll end up giving seminars to both parents and children. It really helps to have the whole family on board for the lifestyle that is created in a household. Depending on the age of the child or adolescent, there are some pretty easy ways to have children get involved with food and cooking. Have them choose a fruit or vegetable at the store and pick a meal that they want to help with. Another resource for children's nutrition are the dietary reference intakes, or DRIs, of vitamins and minerals. Now, typically, DRIs are lower at younger ages and progressively increase throughout the teenage years. Complete lists of DRIs for all age groups can be found online. But calcium and iron intake are of particular concern, so I'll talk about those. Calcium is required for proper bone growth and strength. The total intake, along with calcium and exercise, lay the foundation for bone strength into adulthood. In fact, geriatric conditions are caused by lack of physical activity, lack of calcium, and lack of vitamin D as a child and as a young adult. And these include osteopenia, which is low bone mineral density, and osteoporosis, which is very low bone density or highly porous and brittle bones. Both osteopenia and osteoporosis are often considered pediatric diseases with geriatric consequences. This means that how you treat your bones as a child will have an impact on your health when you become older. Check out the current DRIs for specific recommendations. And dairy foods provide about 75% of the calcium in North America. But foods like fortified orange juice and cereals and spinach all contain calcium too. And supplements can also be used if calcium-containing foods can't be added to the diet. The other major micronutrient to consider for children is iron. Iron is actually one of the most common nutrient deficiencies worldwide. Iron helps transport both oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. When children and adolescents do not get enough iron in their diets, iron deficiency is likely, and something called iron deficiency anemia may occur, where there is a low level of red blood cell production. Low levels of iron in general can lead to fatigue, brittle hair and nails, pale skin, and poor growth. I think you'll be amazed to learn that an early study from the Department of Pediatrics at Baystate Medical Center found that about 45% of female teenage endurance athletes and about 15% of male teenage endurance athletes were iron deficient following an 11-week competitive season. For active people, the lack of ability to transport oxygen in the blood is not healthy and will reduce performance. These findings are specific to this study, but other studies agree. During the teenage years, girls need 15 to 18 milligrams, and boys need 11 milligrams of iron per day. And teen girls need more because of the loss of iron that occurs with menses. But spinach, most beans, steak, and fortified cereals all can easily provide enough iron. One caveat is that iron toxicity can occur anywhere around 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight and beyond. While this isn't likely to occur from eating whole foods, it could happen if a child swallowed about 15 to 20 iron tablets in supplement form. This sounds odd, but for some children, iron supplements or multivitamins may look like candy. So always be cautious with what is available to your children. Outside of these calorie and nutrient issues for children, their hydration needs must also be considered, particularly if your child is very active. Young children end up with a higher core temperature and they sweat less than adolescents do, despite having more sweat glands per unit skin area than either adolescents or adults. One thing that is both a disadvantage and advantage for children is their large surface area per unit of body mass compared to adults. This body surface to mass ratio causes them to heat up more quickly from the environment. However, because of their high body surface to mass ratio, children also cool at a faster rate than adults. The research is actually mixed as to whether or not children are at a disadvantage in terms of regulating their body temperature, a process called thermoregulation. One landmark study had 5 prepubertal girls and 5 college-aged women exercise at a slow pace on a treadmill for 50 minutes in 3 different environmental temperatures. As the temperature increased for each trial, the young girls could not tolerate exercise for quite as long as the college-aged women. In fact, at all environmental temperatures, the girls had higher heart rates and higher temperatures than the women. This likely had to do again with the body surface area to weight ratio that I discussed. Now, drinking water or even diluted sports drinks is a good idea, especially during vigorous exercise and outside in warm weather. On the other end of the spectrum are nutrition and exercise changes that occur as we age. In general, there is a lack of understanding by people that their nutritional needs change as they age. You may be surprised to learn that the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, has found an overall decline in the diet quality of Americans over age 65. The World Health Organization, or WHO, also reports alarming rates of obesity worldwide for all of us, including those over 65 years old. And this correlates with the American data. While there is no magic drink, potion, or pill for aging, we do know that proper nutrition and exercise are vital for increasing longevity and improving quality of life as you age. It is not uncommon for exercise to slow down or become non-existent as we grow older. In fact, the U.S. Center for Disease Control, or CDC, has reported that only about 28 to 34% of adults ages 65 to 74 are physically active. The WHO recommends at least 150 minutes of activity, but says that for real benefits, it's best to exercise roughly 300 minutes per week. That comes out to 1 hour per day, 5 days per week. This should be a mix of moderate and vigorous exercise. If you don't exercise now, that shouldn't stop you. Start. You can add fitness, muscle, and strength at any age. Now keep in mind that there are plenty of examples where older individuals who are not only active, but are athletes. For example, at age 84, Lou Hollander completed an Ironman distance triathlon, which is 2.2 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and 26.2 miles of running. There is also research evidence to show that muscle quality and quantity remains excellent if physical activity is consistently part of your daily routine. In addition, it's important to eat properly, to not only fuel for a healthy life, but to help with physical activity, to reduce fatigue, and to maintain or build muscle mass. As you'll recall, protein intake for aging people is extremely important. According to the research on protein needs of older people, protein intake should be almost double compared to the recommended amounts of 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day, or 0.36 grams per pound of body weight per day. This is due to the fact that as we age, we are challenged by anabolic resistance, where we grow resistant to the growth-promoting properties of protein. Anabolic resistance develops as early as roughly age 40, give or take a few years. It is important to also include resistance training or weightlifting in your exercise plan in order to maintain or improve muscle mass, the very thing that keeps you moving and healthy. So, aiming for about 30 to 40 grams of protein each time you eat may be optimal to improve muscle mass and defend against any age-related decline in muscle mass. It should equal out over an entire day to just less than 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 160 pounds, you would aim for protein intake somewhere between 115 and 160 grams, which you can get from lean meat, dairy products, protein powders, or proper combinations of plant foods. You want to combine this nutrition strategy with resistance training. Research that looked at 3 months of resistance training and protein intake in over 100 people between 50 and 80 years old concluded that higher protein intake led to the best improvements in muscle mass. To fight off sarcopenia, or the age-related decline in muscle mass that affects nearly 50% of men and 60% of women ages 60 to 69 years old, you have to lift weights and eat enough calories and protein. And because hunger can decrease with age, it is also important to just be aware of your total calorie intake. Now, 2 other nutrient considerations to pay attention to as you age are vitamin D and calcium. To help maintain bone mass and prevent the loss of bone, where something called bone resorption exceeds bone formation, it is a good idea to eat calcium-containing foods like dairy products, green leafy vegetables, and fruit. Or you can simply use a calcium supplement. The average intake of calcium in older populations is between 650 and 800 milligrams per day, but it should be 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per day. And omnivores can get the recommended amount by combining multiple food sources throughout the day. For example, 1 cup of milk, 1 packet of oatmeal, 1 cup of yogurt, and a 6-ounce portion of salmon would be good. For plant eaters, you might try a glass of orange juice fortified with calcium and other foods like an ounce of almonds, 4 ounces of tofu, half a cup of soybeans, and a slice of calcium-fortified bread. It is pretty easy, but you can also use a calcium supplement. And calcium supplements are available in 2 forms. These are calcium carbonate and calcium citrate. Calcium carbonate is designed for people with ample stomach acid, typically younger individuals. But as we age, the production of stomach acid can also decline. So for older people, using calcium citrate, which is naturally a little acidic, will help with the absorption of calcium. About 90% of men and women over age 51 do not meet the recommended vitamin D intake of 600 to 800 international units. So you should make an effort to get some sun exposure or supplement with vitamin D to make sure you have enough to meet your needs. Lastly, dehydration is also a concern in older individuals. Usually, your kidneys respond to changes in blood volume and salt concentration by producing a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. This hormone does what it sounds like. It stops or slows diuresis, or the production of urine to conserve water. In older people, even though ADH is produced, it turns out that there are fewer nephrons, or active components of the kidney, for the ADH to act upon, and the nephrons are just less responsive in general. Dehydration can also be an issue because older individuals have a decrease in thirst sensation. So even when dehydrated, older people just do not respond with the same level of thirst as a younger person. You can easily see that a lower perceived level of thirst would probably lead to less fluid intake and just exacerbate dehydration. Between the reduced ability to respond to dehydration and a reduction in thirst, older people can have a major issue with regulating body water content. A key message is that in older people, if you don't have the urge to drink fluids, you may need to. Experts have often said thirst cannot be used as a reliable indicator of the fluid requirements of older individuals. Now you can see that even though the most common nutrition recommendations may work for a lot of people with many different goals, there certainly are some very specific needs for certain populations. In this lecture, we discussed plant-based eating and nutritional concerns for both young people and older people. But there are definitely more special considerations, especially when you begin to incorporate specific diseased populations. In general, total caloric intake, protein content, micronutrient needs, and hydration status are areas to think about as you continue your quest for optimal health. Try this. Just get more vegetables into your diet. Aim to eat an additional 1 to 2 servings of vegetables per day, 3 days per week to start.